Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to be diving in to a couple of different Mechdar lists that I've been brainstorming about over the last couple days since I came out with my Mechdar video. So today, after a late day at work, I headed to the hobby shop and I actually played one of these lists in a game, and I was essentially able to pull off what I thought would be achievable with this particular list. Now, I wanted to first kind of talk about the general strategy to Mechdar that I believe will be successful in Pry Nexus after the changes. And that is what I like to call a mobile staging strategy. So, I went over this in my Mechdar video posted a couple days ago, but wanted to review it for those of you who haven't seen the video or maybe just forgot. This is essentially what it is. You have about 6 grab tanks in your list. They could be fire prisms, 3 of them. 3 of them could be falcons, but the other 3 basically have to be wave serpents. And the reason for this is because you're going to use their scout move that they get with corsairs. By the way, if you have a unit of corsairs in a wave serpent, the wave serpent does get scout as long as all of the models inside have scout. So you can't throw a death jester in there too. You got to just put the corsairs in. Having said that, if you want a scout move and then you get the first turn, want to move your death jester into the wave serpent later, you can do that, and that's a viable strategy. And it's actually something I did at one point in the game with one of my characters. Okay, so the idea is, this is train layout 2, by the way, you get a couple of your wave serpents behind a good piece of terrain in the middle of the board, and you use the other falcons and wave serpents to essentially screen for those models that you've placed right here in the middle. And what do I mean by that? Well, I don't mean physically screen out everything, right? There's going to be stuff that can maybe deep strike in here, come out of reserve in here, stuff like that. You can't screen everything with this type of list unless you're really on point with, other units in the army. Especially in the late game, right? If you go against something like Hypercrypt, or you go against something like Grey Knights where they're, coming up and coming down every turn, you're not going to be able to stop everything at every point in the game. But if we post up Falcon right here, we move up maybe with a Fire and Fade first turn, Falcon right here, we can actually ensure that whatever comes in here is most likely going to die a pretty terrible death next turn, right? The player that comes in here has a choice. Do I kill one of these wave serpents? Do I kill this falcon? By the way, at this point, this unit wouldn't have been deployed. Just letting you guys know that. Or do I kind of just try to maybe go for some infantry if it's there? There's not a lot of good options, right? Your opponent comes down, they can kill one thing. They probably only have the space to deploy one unit, if these models are still here. And just to give you an example, right, each of these little tiny boxes is 1 inch, so they have to be about 9 inches away unless they use a stratagem. So, somewhere here probably. But even then, that's a stretch. I mean, they may have to just squeeze in over here. Maybe they can, deep strike a squad of 5 Grey Knights, or, maybe one. I mean, it's a big deal, but, maybe one Satan Shard, perhaps. Something like that. And again, maybe they kill one wave serpent, maybe they don't. But that unit is going to be in a bad spot. So chances are your opponent's not going to want to really do this. Now, the opponent I played against was a Space Marines player. He did have Inceptors. He did deep strike them within 3 inches, but he didn't have a lot of good targets. And the great thing about Eldar Mech is a lot of these stuff that's really deadly against are infantry, like Tempestus Achillans, which, by the way, I was right, guys. They're super OP. They're being used in tournaments and spammed, like I thought. Are really good against Eldar, especially the infantry, right? Being able to deep strike within 3 of a unit of Swooping Hawks, wipe it off the board, get pretty much an even trade, and then some, possibly, is really good. So, in this scenario, imagine all these units are inside their wave serpents. Tempestus Achillans come down here and try to shoot at a wave serpent, and they're just not going to be able to kill it. They don't have the damage. a big unit of 10 Tempestus Scions comes down, they can't really fit because they have to come outside of 9 inches. So it's not good news for that unit if they try to do this. So the idea of this list, secure this edge of the board, kind of like an L shape down here, right? Doesn't matter if you're deployed, in a, if you have table corners deployment, you can still do this. If you have Dawn of War deployment, you can still do this. The only deployment I can see it being a problem with is Hammer and Anvil. And even in Hammer and Anvil, there's ways that you can do it. You just have to be a little bit more clever with it. Imagine this is, your deployment zone from here to here, right? You can come up here and use this side as your, kind of L from here to here. Okay, anyway. So that's what we got going on. And the idea is present this to your opponent. They can't really take you out from behind. You have units to screen here. You probably have something over here. You have something over here. Opponent can't get to you. And then you basically at your leisure can throw units into their deployment zone. You can throw units onto the center objective to kill their units that are trying to capture. You have this objective secured. You have this objective secured. And you essentially control or not fully control, but you control fully 2 objectives, and you're contesting 2 other ones throughout the entire game. Your opponent really only gets this objective to play with, right? So this is the power of Mechdar, at least in theory. And I played a game the other day, and it actually worked out quite well. Worked out pretty much like this. Against your, standard vanilla Marine player, it works really well. And theoretically, it has really good play into factions that like to deep strike a lot and stuff like that, because you're denying a huge part of the board from your opponent, right? They can't really get in here viably. Now, I do want to address one other concern, and I will kind of address that more when I go into the lists. But one of the concerns was, well, yes, Proxy Hammer, this looks good, but what about the damage? Doesn't seem to do a lot of damage. You have 3 Wave Serpents in the list. Their damage isn't super great. You have a lot of vehicles, but where are your heavy hitters, right? Where's your Avatar of Cain? Where is your Wraith Brick? Where is your, huge squad of Quins with Yvrane? Where are those units? Your units that are going to crack through really tough stuff in your opponent's list. And here's the beauty about this list is, what you see on the board right now is not the full army. It is just over half of the list. Because of all the points buffs that we got, you can field so much more in this type of list. So, without further ado, now that we've kind of gone over the basic strategy of how to play this, let's dive in to some of the lists that I have theory crafted, and I'll tell you which one I brought today. Okay, so let's go over the one that I brought today first. This is one that I'm very familiar with. This is essentially Mechdar with a heavy aspect warrior focus. And this is something that I've played a lot of over the years, and this is why I chose to bring it today, just to see, if the concept actually worked with the points buffs and stuff like that. And essentially what it is, we start off here. For our epic heroes, we have Phoenix Lords, 2 of them, Fuegan and Cahandras. Fuegan, of course, is a staple because he's just so hard-hitting. He's your, heavy hitter, essentially. He can go up there, he can pop a tank in 1 hit. He's really strong. He's good in combat against things like Terminators. He can revive himself. He's sticky. He's essentially one of the perfect models for this type of army, actually. Cahandras with Scorpions is also very tough. And not tough in, he can take a lot of damage away, but he's tough to deal with because he's in a Falcon, and he can kind of go up, hit something really hard, hit a unit of Terminators pretty hard, and kill them. And yeah, he might not be able to solo like a squad of Deathwing Knights or anything like that with your Scorpions, but with Falcon support and the other stuff you have in your army, you can absolutely believe that he can deal significant damage to that unit. And perhaps, again, with support, killed him. We have an Autarch in the list just on foot. Now, a lot of people will say, well, why don't you have the Wayleaper in this list? Basically, it's because I want to maximize the amount of units that I have in the Wave Serpents, and I want to maximize the amount of control I can exert over the battlefield. And a Way Leaper, with the nerfs to secret missions and stuff like that, I just don't really see the Way Leaper being useful for how I liked to run him before the nerf to secret missions. I really loved baiting my opponent into capturing objectives, taking a lead on primary, and then scoring a secret mission late in the game when I knew I could, just throw my Way Leaper up there and essentially win a bunch of points at the last turn. You can't do that anymore. It is a shame, but what are you going to do? So, the Autarch on foot is there. He has really good CP management, and we are going to stick him with a unit of Guardian Defenders so that we can just continuously put a Bright Lance out there, fire a Bright Lance, Phantasm back. Perhaps your opponent doesn't want to shoot at the Guardians. You can use that same Bright Lance to Overwatch for free. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with the Autarch on foot now. He does have a Dragon Fusion gun, just because I like it, but you could easily go with the Reaper launcher and have just as much success firing at long range. We have for battle line 3 units of Void Reavers. 5. They are armed with power weapons and pistols. I think the rifles are terrible, and I've learned this the hard way over the course of the edition. I used to think they were the way to go. They just don't do enough damage. You really do need to give them the power weapons so they can actually have an impact on the battlefield. One of them does have a blaster as well, and the leader, the Felarch, has a Neuro Disruptor. Is it better than a Shuriken pistol? Absolutely. Is it realistically going to do that much for you? No. But again, slightly better than the Shuriken pistol, so that's why I took it. 3 units of those to give our Wave Serpent Scout. We have that unit of Guardian Defenders I told you about. Also generates Fate Dice, which is weirdly good in this list just because you have so many vehicles who could benefit from, blanking a damage every once in a while. So that's really cool. We have 2 units of Fire Dragons with what you'd expect. We have the Fire Pike Exarchs, and they're there for, killing those Deathwing Knights and stuff like that, or other hard targets that you normally wouldn't be able to kill, like your Catan Shards. By the way, Fire Dragons are excellent against Catan Shards. I know there's some doubters out there, but because of their Melto 3, they're able to actually get that through that half damage ability that the Catan Shards have. And they're also pretty good against stuff like the Avatar of Cain and the Incarn as well for their points. They can do a lot of wounds. Plus, they can throw a grenade. So, on top of being able to throw a grenade, they can put a lot of damage with their Melto weapons in. We have 2 units of 5 Rangers. These are for early game screening and early game objectives. And again, I told you guys about the little ranger trick, right? Opponent moves up within 9. They can actually use their Path of the Outcast ability to move back into a Wave Serpent. And that is why our Wave Serpents only have 5 Void Reavers in them, so that we have room on the first turn, if we want to move those Rangers in there. We also have 2, actually scratch that, 3 units of Striking Scorpions. 1 unit of Striking Scorpions with Kahandras. They have the Scorpion's Claw because Kahandras gives them +1 to hit. So makes the Claw a little bit better. We also have 2 units of Striking Scorpions with the Blades. They're going to be infiltrating, and they're going to be basically preventing opponents from trying to stage on you in the early turns of the game. So it's just more infiltrators, right? It prevents your opponent from taking board control super early. These guys can be used to screen. They can charge into enemy units and dismantle them before they get the chance to hit. Things like Assault Intercessors, they're really good at taking out. And I love the potential Alpha Strike that 2 units of Striking Scorpions can have to throw off your opponent. So we do have 2 units of these, and plus they're cheap enough to where you can throw them kind of away for 65 points, to be honest. They're not expensive at all. Very cheap unit, and they do a lot of damage for the cost. We also have, for vehicles, 3 Falcons. They're going to be carrying Kahandras, Fire Dragons, and Fuegan in there. Fuegan will be separate from a Fire Dragon unit so that he can kind of come out on his own. Fire Dragons don't want to be in combat. Fuegan does want to be in combat, so that's what we're doing there. And we also have 2 Warwalkers. Again, this is this is kind of one of those dual threats, right? You can have them just sitting in the back for Bright Lance fire to come out and shoot Bright Lances or whatever comes in the midboard. Or you can use them aggressively if you get turn 1, scout up, move up, shoot something important, kill it, overwatch, do some more damage to your opponent's units that are in their deployment zone, and for 110 points you've caused a major disruption in your opponent's plans. So we can do that, or again, like I said, you can kind of keep them back, play them more conservatively, and control the firing lanes with them. Lastly, we have 3 Wave Serpents. We got twin Bright Lances on each of these. They do have the Shuriken Cannons. Now, I do want to make a point. Wave Serpents are criminally underrated for how much damage they do. Yes, they are 110 points. They only have 2 weapons, but compare them to the Warwalker. Warwalkers have 2 Bright Lances, and the reason why we take Warwalkers, guys, Scout, right? That's the reason these are so good. The -1 to wound is okay. The 4+ invul is okay, like, you know, it's not bad. But it's not going to keep them alive against anything serious. The Wave Serpent, on the other hand, is just as durable as the Warwalker. Has more wounds, still has a 5+ invul, not a 4+, but a 5+. It has more toughness, so against a lot of different weapons out there, it's actually more survivable maybe, or just as survivable as the Warwalker. And obviously it transports things. Now, the only difference here is that instead of having 2 Bright Lances, it has a twin-linked Bright Lance and a Shuriken Cannon. So the twin-linked Bright Lance, a lot of people will kind of rag on it, but it does allow you a wound reroll without having to use your army ability or detachment bonus. So that's actually pretty good, right? You shoot this thing off, you reroll the hit with the Bright Lance, and that means your Shuriken Cannons are just hitting harder, right? You technically get a better chance of being able to have a hit reroll on the Shuriken Cannon, which gives you a better chance at sustained hits. And you get a wound reroll on it because Shuriken Cannons have trouble wounding against tougher targets. So you can actually get a little bit more damage out of your Shuriken Cannon by being able to save it. And the twin-linked Bright Lance allows for that little bit of extra efficiency. So, is it, mathematically as good as just 2 straight Bright Lances against a large target? No, but it gives you a little bit of variety, gives you a little bit of diversibility against infantry units and, things like Terminators and stuff like that. Especially with the Wave Serpent's ability that just deals D3 mortal wounds and a Battle Shock test. So Wave Serpents, I think they're a little bit underrated. A lot of people don't like them. But, I think going forward, being 110 points, they're kind of like a budget transport at this point, and they are very good for the cost. Compare them to a Devilfish. I think a Devilfish is like, 80 points, 85 points? For 25 more points, you're getting a lot more than a Devilfish. Yeah, Devilfish get the Seeker missiles and all that, but they're hitting on 4+, usually the Seeker missiles. They're once per game only, and there's a lot of other stuff. Devilfish are good, don't get me wrong, but at 25 more points, you're getting a lot more in terms of stats than you would get with the Devilfish. So I think these are actually really good. Now, this is the list. Couple things to note. There's no Farseer in this list. I could probably fit a Farseer in here if I didn't want an Autarch. But, of course, you want an Autarch, right? You want those CP. I just think there's no real need for one, honestly. And I know that's controversial. But if you really wanted one, you could get rid of a Ranger, you could get rid of a Scorpion, and you could throw in an Autarch. Or, excuse me, a Farseer. Right? So that's not a big deal. There's ways to do it. I found that I didn't really need it. I know it seems weird, but we have so many Bright Lances in this list, guys. Right? We have 3 right here, Twin-Link Bright Lances. We have even more Bright Lances. We have even more Bright Lances and Pulse Lasers. We have Fire Dragons, which are also really good at killing those targets. We have another Bright Lance and a Guardian Defender unit. We have enough Bright Lances, right? We don't really need a Farseer in this list, I don't think. Honestly. But, again, if you did want to put a Farseer in there, you could. You just have to change it a little bit. I personally, after the game I played, I didn't need it, but I could see myself eventually putting in a Farseer in this list by, removing a squad of Rangers, squad of Scorpions, and maybe putting some sort of maybe putting Fate's Messenger on the Autarch, but that's about it. This list performed very well in the game. I was basically able to, get set up during the first turn, and believe it or not, actually didn't get the first turn, but I was still able to set up just fine because of the way my opponent moved his units, and because, Space Marines are typically kind of slower. So I was able to still set up okay, and then after that, I had full reign on my opponent's units from the safety of terrain. So I was able to control the board, I was able to kill what I needed to destroy, moving into the midfield, and it was almost staggering at one point. My opponent moved a unit of aggressors into the midfield to kill one of my units, and, Fuegan had to take the hit, but in retaliation, I had so much firepower coming in, 3 Falcons worth of firepower, Wave Serpents, those aggressors just were wiped off the field. The Land Raider that they came in was also wiped off the field. It's a really strong list. It has a lot of damage. A lot of people look at something like this, don't think it has the damage, but it does. It's incredible. So this is the first list. If you want to run something that's, very aspect heavy, could definitely look like this. You could also run Dire Avengers with a Zerman by swapping out a couple things. I think he's viable. Dire Avengers are viable. There's a competitive list that won 3rd place at a GT recently, and I'm going to share that with you guys in a future video and talk about that list. But yeah, it ran Dire Avengers with a Zerman, which I thought was really cool as well. Okay, but what if you don't want Falcons? What if you want to use prisms? Well, I have you covered there as well. We have Mechdar with fire prisms. Now this list is going to work a little different. So we're still going to have Fuegan in the list, but we don't have Falcons, so no Cahandras, right? We don't need Cahandras, we don't need Striking Scorpions. We do have the Solitaire. By the way, Fuegan's just good. That's why I have him in the list, really. He's just a really good piece that kind of brings the Mechdar list together, because he can move up, go into a Wave Serpent after it's used its scout move. So turn 1, he can move up in there. And then he has a really good threat range, basically on 2 different objectives that he can kill stuff on. Really strong. Solitaire is also really good because he can do the same thing. He can move up to 12 inches, go in a Wave Serpent, disembark 3 inches, use his, blitz ability, and just shoot across the board like a rocket and kill whatever you want. Or he can kind of stay back, do objectives. He can do a lot of stuff. He's really good. You have the Autarch on foot, same build. We have 3 units of Corsair Void Reavers. Again, this is the core of the list. This is the core function of the list here, is the Corsair Void Reavers and the 3 Wave Serpents. They're still in there. We do have the Guardian Defender, which, again, I just think Guardian Defenders are really good now in this type of list because they're just generating fate dice. It can be used for armor saves, can be used for invul saves and stuff like that on your Serpents. Plus, with the Autarch, I just think they become so much better. You have 3 units of Fire Dragons. Now, you might be curious, wait a second, Proxy Hammer, why do you have Fire Dragons in a list that doesn't have any Falcons? That's absurd. Notice here that the Exarch has the Dragon Fusion gun. So what we're doing here is we're actually using the Fire Dragons to move up, perhaps into the Wave Serpents, or if your opponent moves too far up, 15 Fire Dragons can come forward, advance, and shoot hot Melta into anything that is crossing the middle of the board. These guys are really good, actually, at just kind of hiding behind walls, popping out, throwing a grenade, and then shooting. They're absolutely superb at it. So they're really good. Haven't tried this list out yet, but I'm convinced that Fire Dragons on foot are a good option against Terminator equivalent stuff, and especially in this list where you already are staging and kind of setting up on the board, these guys can be really good. We do have 5 Rangers because we need those. We need infiltrators to kind of make sure your opponent is not, goose stepping on you. And we have 5 Striking Scorpions as well. Again, these 2 units are going to be infiltrating. We don't have as much Alpha Strike in this list because this list is going to be a little bit less aggressive. We're kind of more trying to wait until your opponent comes into the mid board. That's why we have the fire prisms. They're kind of trying to get angles on enemy units and stuff like that. We're going to use those fire prisms to dissuade your opponent from coming into places where you have line of sight to, which on most boards will be everything if you position your fire prisms correctly. Now, in this particular list, again, because it's not as aggressive, we're going to need units that can fill that secondary objective role, which is going to be swooping hawks, right? 2 units of swooping hawks will be extremely effective at not only scoring objectives, but taking care of, light infantry and stuff like that. In my other list, the aspect list, we had units like, striking scorpions who have so many attacks they can deal with hordes, but this list can't really as easily deal with hordes. It still can, don't get me wrong, because fire prisms have the disperse shot, but it's not as good at it. I would say not as efficient at it. So, if your opponent drops a blob of 20 Imperial Guardsmen on the center objective, you don't want to waste, multiple fire prisms trying to get that blob done. Probably some swooping hawks could do it for you, but these are mostly secondary objective units. And then we have our 3 fire prisms, which have been reduced in cost. And then lastly, we have our 3 wave serpents with bright lances. So again, this list has a ton of bright lances. We have 3 from the wave serpents. Of course, the fire prisms are their own like heavy anti-tank. We also have 3 units of fire dragons for terminators. We have those guardians that have the bright lance that can just, pop in and pop out of cover. And we have our core. We have our Corsair Void Reavers. We do have Fuegan still. We do have the Solitaire. And this is a list that I would be comfortable running with fire prisms in it, knowing that it's going to do good work against your opponent. Okay, so that's the fire prism list. Now let me bring you to another type of list that involves using Wraiths. A lot of people ask me, how would you make a Mechdar list with Wraith units? And this is how I would do it. Okay, so we got the Autarch on foot. That's our core, right? We're always going to go with that because we're going to put them with Guardians. We have 3 Spirit Seers. I know that sounds crazy, right? But we're going to have 3 units of Wraithguard in this list, and Wraithguard and Wraithblades both do need Spirit Seers to function at full capacity. We have 3 units of Corsairs. That's our core, like usual. We have Guardian Defenders. We have our 1 unit of Rangers, 1 unit of Scorpions, which I believe is, what you need to have, just minimum, to be able to kind of control infiltrators and scouts and stuff like that early game. We have those 2 units of Swooping Hawks because, again, we do need a little bit more mobility. Rates are slow. They're not going to be able to get to certain spots of the board that easily, even in a Wave Serpent. So we have these 2 Hawks for that. And we do have 3 units of Wraiths. Now, I chose for this one to kind of go a little bit of a variety, a little bit of a roulette wheel here. We have 5 with Ghost Axe and Force Shield. Their job is to maybe get onto an objective early and secure it on the left-hand side of the board or the right-hand side of the board. They are not meant to do a ton of damage to a lot of different targets because, 5 Wraith Blades, they're not going to do a ton of damage, but they can take out, a unit of 5 Marines or something like that. They can scrap with certain units if they get the charge, but they're not going to be your heavy damage dealers. We also have 5 Wraith Blades with Ghost Swords. This is a tech pick because the Ghost Swords are better into single wound models, so things like, Leagues of Votann, weirdly enough, we've seen them rise in competitive play recently because of the buffs that they got. So Ghost Swords are good against those. Ghost Swords are also good against Horde units. We have the Spirits here in that unit, so they're getting a bunch of lethal hits as well, so they can, fight against higher toughness. They're not as survivable, but if they're in cover, they're still pretty durable. And then we have the Wraith Guard. And the Wraith Guard are just, we need some additional anti-tank in the list. We don't have Fire Dragons to help us out. So we have some Wraith Cannons here. And I think realistically, if you're running these in a Wave Serpent, you can go with the D-Sites. I think the D-Sites are best in a Wave Serpent with a unit of 5. But the Wraith Cannons are also still good, and I think we just need some heavy punch in this list, because remember, we also don't have Fire Prisms. So we do need something that can, march forward, punch a tank in the face, and eliminate it. But if you're running a Wraith list with Mechdar, feel free to change these out. I haven't exactly tried out this loadout. There may be a Wraith unit in here that just isn't that useful, and I don't know it yet because I haven't tried it. And this is just theory hammer at this point, You could go up against a Space Marine player, and maybe the Ghost Axe and Force Shield isn't that great because they don't have a lot of AP. I don't know. But just think about that when you're doing your list. What do you go against a lot? What units are, effective for you? And then, of course, we have the Triple Serpent. And the Triple Serpent, oh, excuse me, not the Triple Serpent, sorry. The Six Serpent. We have the Six Serpent list here. Now, the Serpents are going to be in place of essentially Falcons, so they're going to be carrying the Wraith Blades and Wraith Guard because Falcons can't carry Wraith Blades and Wraith Guard unless they've already taken some casualties, so we can't do that. But we can definitely put more Serpents into the list. And I don't think you're losing a ton. You're losing damage, obviously, because Falcons are really good, but at dealing damage. But the Wave Serpents are still good enough to where, you're not missing a ton, right? You're essentially missing a Pulse Laser from your list. So you're missing 3 Pulse Lasers from the list. I hope that that's kind of made up for by the extra, damage and extra durability that the Wraith Blades and Wraith Guard have. Okay, so that's the Wraiths. But what about the Ynnari? Some people have asked me, is this able to be run in a Ynnari list? And the answer is yes, absolutely you can do this. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And it's going to be a little bit different, but it's going to have the same essence to it. So let's take a look. So we have our Ynnari, we have the Vizark and Yvraine. Wonder who they're going to be with. We have the Autarch on foot. Yes, it seems weird to some of you that I would still include this, but a free stratagem every turn in an army that otherwise does not have any CP generation is really good. We do have a Warlock just because I had 45 points left over. And I figured, the Warlock isn't that bad. I can put him with the Guardian Defenders. If my opponent tries to deep strike charge me, I can say, oh, -2 to charge. And my opponent's going to have a harder time getting in. So I figured it wasn't the worst spend. We, of course, also have the, kind of dual Corsair Void Reavers. Now, you might be wondering, where's the triple Reavers? I thought that was a necessity. Well, we're going to use one of the Wave Serpents to carry your Vrain, and we're going to have some other things that can kind of function like the Void Reavers in a certain way, and we'll get into that, and that's just because we're using Dark Eldar units as well. So we have some Dark Eldar units that are kind of taking the role from the Void Reavers, and I didn't think we quite needed that many Void Reavers in this particular list. We do have our Guardian Defenders, and we have Cobalite Warriors. So the Cobalite Warriors are going to be split up in Venoms. Venoms are very good in Ynnari because of the Bladestorm stratagem. You get extra AP, and it just shreds Marine equivalents. It just absolutely shreds them. So we're going to run 2 units of these in Venoms. We're going to have 2 units of Fire Dragons. They are actually going to be in Falcons. They do have the Fire Pikes, and we are going to run Falcons in this list because Falcons are great. They're a great unit to have in a mechanized army, and that goes for Ynnari as well. We have 2 units of Mandrakes to sub in for Swooping Hawks because they're cheaper and we can afford more on our list. And I really like Mandrakes because, they basically have the same abilities as Swooping Hawks. They're a little bit cheaper, and they can do combat better than the Swooping Hawks. So if you do need to throw them into, a unit of Cultists, for example, these guys can actually kill Cultists pretty good. So it's always a threat to your opponent. We have 5 Rangers, we have 5 Striking Scorpions. Now, I know you guys might think, well, what about the Mandrakes? They have Infiltrate. Why do you need Scorpions? Well, because even though they still have Infiltrate, I think they have a different role, right? Mandrakes are more like Swooping Hawks. You want to use them to screen, and then you want to, kind of fade into the shadows, fade away ability, and then pop out later, score objectives, things like that. With Striking Scorpions, it's more like you're trying to prevent people from staging on you. You know, Mandrakes, they don't have the best damage, so a Marine player with Assault Intercessors or something that's going to, come up behind a wall and stage against your army probably doesn't care about 5 Mandrakes, to be honest, but they will care about 5 Striking Scorpions. We do have a 10-man unit of Harlequin Troop. Of course, we have the double pistol, the double fusion pistol, the double neuro disruptor pistol, and, of course, we have all the Harlequin special weapons and the power sword for the troop leader. This unit is going to be joined by the Vizark and Yvraine, and it is going to be your heavy punching unit, just like, before we had Kahandras and Scorpions. This is going to be our heavy punch with this army. Vehicles, 2 Falcons, like I said, carrying Fire Dragons. We have 2 Venoms carrying the Cobalite Warriors. Normally, you just take 1 and 1 is put in reserve, but, I kind of wanted to run 2. It was mechanized, I had 70 points left over. I figured, why not? It makes sense, And here's a cool thing, actually, as well, is that, and it won't work for this list because we already kind of have everything placed in our transports, but if you put Cobalite Warriors in a Falcon, which you can in Ynnari, by the way, if you put them in a Falcon here, that Falcon actually also gets sticky objectives because of the Cobalite special rule, which includes the transport that they join, also getting sticky objectives when they're in it. So that's kind of cool. Is it, something that's going to just outright be super cheesy and win you games? Probably not, but, bringing a unit Cobalites coming out of a Falcon isn't bad. Could be good, right? Especially if your Venoms are somehow destroyed. Of course, Venoms are there. They're pretty good for 70 points. And then we have 3 Wave Serpents. 2 of them, of course, have the Corsairs in them to scout up. And then we have 1 Wave Serpent carrying your Vrain. Now, the thing about this list as well is that it is written to account for the space, right? And I told you guys earlier, you can only fit truly about 6 grav tanks in your deployment zone and be safe behind cover. So in this one, we have 5 grav tanks, and of course we have 2 Venoms, which are much smaller. So the 2 Venoms can easily take the place of a Wave Serpent or a Wave Serpent or a Falcon, and then we have 1 less Falcon. So we have more room in our deployment zone to be able to do that. Oh, and by the way, there's nothing stopping you from deep striking one of these Venoms instead, right? You could always deep strike with the Venom. So that can save you some room in deployment zone if you don't have quite enough room and you're like, man, I don't have enough room to deploy all these grav tanks with this. I can deploy 1 Venom easily, but this extra Venom, it's like popping out, and, I don't want it to, get shot off the board turn 1, then deep strike it, right? Deep strike the one that just has the splinter rifles in it, and that's perfect. That's perfect because you can still use Blade Storm right out of deep strike, and it should work very well with that. So that is the Ynnari list. Pretty good. I haven't tried this yet, but I think conceptually it works just as well as the others. But let me know what you guys think about these. I wanted to show them off a little bit and talk to you guys a little bit about Mechdar and stuff. We are going to have some videos coming up, on some, Aeldari tournament successes and things like that. We're also going to have a few interviews coming up within the next week or so with, some people on the Discord that, want to talk about their hobbying experiences and stuff. So stay tuned and let me know what you guys think about Mechdar. Personally, I have seen the Eldar win rates. People are saying, oh, it went down. I really only think it went down because Ynnari is not doing as well because of all the Dark Eldar nerfs, right? And I think it's the Eldar win rate because of the Ynnari last patch or before this latest patch was super inflated. I don't even think we should have been at a 48% win rate. I think that was mostly because of Ynnari being lumped in with regular Eldari. I think somebody had mentioned that the actual Eldari win percentage at the time was like 43%. Like, pure Eldari was not doing that great. So I think that's mainly why you see the win rate going down. It's not because we're doing worse as a faction, it's because Ynnari's doing worse, and therefore, that reflects back on the Aeldari. But truth be told, I actually think once people start using more mechanized strategies in tournaments, and once people get this mechanized playstyle down, I think you're going to have a lot of success. I think we're going to see people running Mechdar lists, and I may be completely wrong, but I actually do think that it's cheap enough now to where you can have enough units to where this could be a significant threat in competitive play. So, anyway, just my opinion. We'll see how it unfolds. It's only like, a week into the, it's only been a week also, right? I mean, results are very skewed the first week, so we'll see how things unfold. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching once again. If you do like the content and you want to join our channel's Discord, you can join by signing up for a free Patreon trial. You don't have to pay a thing. You sign up for free. Just cancel the trial, before the first week is up, and you will get permanent access to our Discord community, which is a great community of Eldar players and enthusiasts who love talking about strategy, tactics, and of course, hobbying. I will leave the link for that in the description below. If you want to support the channel on Amazon, I am an Amazon affiliate. You can buy some Eldar minis on Amazon through my affiliate link. You do have to click on the link, and that will bring you to my affiliate page, which I have, the Combat Patrol on there. I have like certain Eldar products that you can purchase, and it will help the channel out. Usually you can get a discount on a lot of the Eldar models on Amazon. And lastly, I have a channel store page as well, which has a bunch of Eldar inspired apparel on it. So if you want to check that out, you want to grab a shirt or a sweatshirt of your favorite craft world or your favorite aspect warrior and stuff like that, or you're just looking to meme, and I have a couple of different Eldar meme kind of shirts on there as well, then you can support the channel that way. Also, right now I have a 40% off apparel for, kind of as a celebration to hitting 5K subs. So, you want to support the channel and grab, a pretty cheap kind of sweater with your favorite Eldar designs on it, check out that link in the description. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.